late and I'm creeping back to the office to take part in an international call to get my induction to the America's Cup spying program. My tutor, well, if the guys on the ribs are 00 agents, then tonight I'm undoubtedly speaking to M, the person behind the scenes, pulling the strings, deciding who the recon teams focus their lenses on. If you're picturing Judi Dench, then you're in for a shock. Tonight, we speak with Ray Davies of Emirates Team New Zealand. Now, Ray would be fascinating to talk to for any number of reasons. He's an accomplished sailor in his own right outside of the America's Cup, but of course he is a veteran of many America's Cup campaigns with One America and Emirates Team New Zealand. He's gone from a sailor to being a super coach and the person responsible from taking the real world learnings back to the simulator and vice versa. But that's not why we're talking to him tonight. We have something much more pressing to cover. I'm reluctant to call this an interview because in reality it's really an induction to the world of AC, intelligence gathering and analysis, and we're getting it right from the heart of the defender of the 37th America's Cup. Tonight we're going to learn why the recon game has changed, what Ray's role is, and how to maximise the value of recon data for better standing of cup design. Fantastic to have you on board, Ray. I know from our chat before, you said you're kind of familiar with the content that we've been putting out on the channel. Have you caught many of the videos from the last cup?
Yeah, Tommy, great to chat with you. And yeah, for sure, you did a fantastic job during that last America's Cup. And you're pretty much the go-to source. You got on top of a couple of niggly rule issues along the way there, and created a huge amount of great debate. And through all that exposure, you've earned the right to receive the recon footage directly.
So actually, I kind of view my role as a bit of a analyst or geek looking into tech, probably quite similar to how the teams have got to treat the data, in that, you know, we're taking a huge pool of information, distilling what are the important points, and then kind of reporting that on to interested parties. Now, I guess in your case, those interesting parties, the design teams, the sailors, the Grant Daltons of the world overseeing it, whereas my interested parties are the good people behind the lens following the cup. But I kind of think there must be some good kind of learnings between the two and how we treat this opportunity. But before we get into that, and before you give me a bit more of an introduction, obviously good to cover the background of the recon, because it's a huge change for this America's Cup.
Yeah, no, basically, the history with recon and the America's Cup, it's been an open kind of a book, and you could spend as much money as you had available on it. And it became particularly challenging through the last couple of editions where teams were based all around the world. Certainly that last edition was really hard to try to keep a handle on everyone. We only had a husband and wife combo doing our recon in the last campaign, and in a couple of moments myself and Glenn Ashby went for a jaunt to check out what was going on. But it was really, really difficult to cover all the other teams. And this was really a concept that Dan Bernasconi came up with as a way to firstly keep the costs down for all of the teams, so we're not all doubling up on sets of recon people, for each team. We would have 3 different groups of recon following us at times in Auckland, which was kind of ridiculous. It's a big fuel burn, but it was hard to figure out how you could do it any other way. So Dan came up with this idea, which was pretty out there, was to have this joint recon program. And it was a lot of debate, and it took quite a while to get it across the line, but he stuck to his guns. And now what it's produced is an amazing platform to generate a huge amount of content. Like it's a ridiculous amount of content that now comes in each day with these specific, 2 recon people that follow each team. So how it works is, say for example, we've talked about ourselves in Auckland. We don't get to choose who the people were that were doing the recon against us. The other teams decide, and then we have to provide a chase boat. And then I just keep in touch with them about what time we're off the dock. They say who they want to interview at the end of the day. And it's been quite foreign to have a couple of guys who aren't part of the team on site, on the forecourt, really, really close to the boat. And I'm sure the other teams are struggling with that concept as well. But as they see, we're all buying in to it together. It's actually really good for everyone as far as generating content. A bunch of shared documents, shared spreadsheets about what teams are. You can put topics up that you're interested, what you want the recon units to capture. So depending on what you see of interest, you just put a comment in that spreadsheet, and then it's up to the recon teams to try and capture that particular point. Make a note of what photos are relevant to that comment, so we can scroll through and access that easier. And then all of their other general footage that they capture, it's up to them to make notes of things that they see of interest and put a little highlights package together. So really this has been a way to, on a daily basis, just capture a huge amount of content, saving a lot of money.
I guess the other thing that was mentioned was the safety aspect of just having so many boats chasing around at 45 knots in potentially confined harbours around the world is a little bit of a not great situation.
Yeah, no, we definitely had a few moments last time. It was just pretty challenging in those short racecourse areas to know if the boat was suddenly going to veer away and head off downwind. Generally, if you're reconning, you're following your boat upwind, you'd stay leeward, so the boat can always tack off at any time. But then you tend to be in a position, as soon as they do a veer away, you're right on their line of fire. And then the flip side, when you're following someone downwind, you'd be on their windward side, so they can always jibe away. Then next thing they turn up and come at you. So we also have VHF radio communication with the recon boat, but at least you're only dealing with one boat. It's much easier to manage.
So that's how things have changed. Just going back to, obviously you've been involved with a few cups with Emirates Team New Zealand, and always at the forefront of pushing new technologies with your team. Do you think you were winning the intelligence war at Emirates Team New Zealand in the past before the joint recon? Obviously we had the foiling cats, which some would say you released to the world a little bit too early for San Francisco. Cyclaws in Bermuda, which kept under wraps beautifully. How do you view the performance of your keeping rules, and will joint recon help that or hinder that for Emirates Team New Zealand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in the past, like you pointed out, we've done some things really well and some things quite poor. And we probably learned from the lessons of, releasing things a bit early. I think you go to the San Fran America's Cup, we released to national TV, day one of foiling. With the big chase boat speeding up and Martin Tasker getting very excited about what was going on. And it got everyone thinking, whereas sort of prior to those sort of images, it was all smoke and mirrors, and some teams thought it was all photoshopped and it wasn't real, and that's not doable, it's physically impossible. So we've done a pretty good job, and then sort of literally let the cat out of the bag fairly early in that campaign. And, we had a huge advantage a long way through that whole San Fran Cup, but sort of let a couple of things out of the bag and we didn't keep improving. And we certainly took away some good lessons from that to then go into Bermuda, where we're very, very conscious of keeping things to ourselves. And as you mentioned, that Cyclaws was a really good example. And obviously there's a huge amount of work that went on behind the scenes before the them on the boat. So that was a good effort for the team to keep that under wraps. But as you pointed out, going forward under this new structure, I think it's going to be much harder for us to keep wraps on things. Now you've literally got two people in your forecourt as you push the boat out of the shed, observing what's changed. You actually have to declare what you've changed on the boat as well. So there's a formal process of the main components. As you release new items, you got to tell the world that you're putting a new rudder on, or a new elevator, or a new flap, or wing. So it's really, really out there to also, generate as much interest as we can. Obviously, the America's Cup format's pretty limited, between actual events. So this is a really good way of just engaging everyone in the technology race, which is the America's Cup. Fastest boat always wins. And, it's very, very much a techie sort of a race. And, definitely Emirates Team New Zealand's done a really good job of sort of leading that. And going into this edition, it's going to be harder to have a performance edge. Everyone knows this type of boat now. We're working up the pyramid to ultimately they'll all look really, really similar. I think already with what we've seen from the other teams, the boats have come together even more than last time. So, the performance differences for sure will be way, way less than what we saw in Auckland. And these boats now, you go back to Auckland, that Christmas Cup, that was a bit of a shambles, that first event. And there's probably people still questioning the class of boat. And obviously there are still people all over the world that question this type of sailing, and they don't even call it sailing. But that's the debate that'll go on forever. But the racing now is actually getting to a point, we're seeing it's going to be spectacular. It's going to be all of the match racing, the covering, herding the other boat off to the boundary, putting your elbows out and just really defending a lead. All of those classic match racing elements that we're used to will start being seen at high speed and in a nice tight amphitheatre sort of course. So it's taken a while for the racing element to catch up to the technology. That all makes sense. So I think the fans are going to be really in for a treat with this type of racing going forward. Obviously Sail GP has some pretty exciting racing on a short tight course, and that's all evolved to really entertaining. And the cup boats are sort of same but different. That good old match racing, one-on-one, attack, defend, move, counter move. It's all going to be talked about as well. But primarily this recon world, it's really hard to keep your secrets under wraps.
No, I think it's going to be a really exciting cup, but seeing those 40s rule race, I think could be really interesting, and seeing the tactics develop. We weren't really sure in the last cup when we got to the first start what the capabilities would be and, what the playbook would be. And that kind of never really got finalised by the end of the cup even. It was still developing day by day. But I think the fans are going to have a lot more insight into both the tech from the Recon, but also the sailing strategy and sailing techniques by watching what developed through the AC40s. So this joint recon, I think one of the things that stands out with me is that it's going to help teams which are poor at recon first of all. Anyone who was either financially restricted or just know how restricted they couldn't get the right personnel in the right place. Do you think there's any teams who are a bit annoyed about this because they saw recon as their strength who shied away from it?
Yeah, maybe. There's teams, there's probably rules that come out all the time that people get a bit upset about, where they might have invested huge amounts of money in the past to have an advantage. Possibly. And it's certainly really hard for teams to adjust to this type of openness. I think that's probably been the biggest challenge for people to get their heads around. But now that it's starting to work, they're getting their head around it, and it's the same for everyone. But I'm sure there's teams that spend it way more money than what we spent on recon. But again, like, specifically talking about recon, it's not just capturing the video and footage, it's, what you do with that information. Do you let it affect your direction? Everyone has timelines that they got to work to. Next thing you see something another team's doing, do you let that information take you away from your pretty rigid sort of built timeframes? The next thing you're on the back foot because you've sped off in a different direction. So it's a really, really interesting balance of what you do with this information, because you've only got a certain amount of money. You can't do everything, and some things are going to be good and teams will do some things better than us, and we can't cover all bases. So you still got to be really smart with your budget, not only just the spend, but also what you actually produce in reality on the water in a timely manner to test it and refine it and ensure it doesn't break.
Yeah, I think we'll touch on the volume of information and how that's kind of processed and interpreted, and where that goes into the team and how distracting it is. But whilst we're on the volume of information, how does the recon material that you're seeing come through the portal? Obviously, it's early days, but how does it compare to what you would have received in previous campaigns?
Yeah, well, it's probably a similar amount per team, so it's just multiplied by 4. So it's a huge amount more, especially once everyone gets going. And then traditionally, you could really keep track of that sort of one team you're following at a time, and you'd just be seeing what other YouTubers are putting up there. This time with the amount of content, each team's going to do it differently, but it's too big a job, for way too much for my capacity to be all over it. We're very much try help administer it and make sure we're getting the points of interest. But then the design team has access to those files. So all their respected areas, they can dive into it. And then eventually we'll have, our meetings on certain topics that can be brought up and discuss it as a group, if anything's of interest. But certainly, for example, the rig guys will pore over the rig photos, whereas the appendage guys may not really even look at the, mast photos. Whereas our sailors are generally keen to sort of see everything, bits of everything, because you can't dive into all of the detail. Sailors will love to see what sort of input devices are being used. Our teams are looking at setting up their cockpits. Really, really restricted again in the rules with what you can do this time around. The rules have only really finally been agreed upon about a week ago on the actual cockpit volume rule and what's covered and what's not. So the way that's long and short on that is basically everyone's going to look really similar. The area of cockpit space that they can work within. Certainly some safety aspects there, and but everyone trying to get down and out of the wind as well. So yeah, no, huge amount of content to pour through. So really, we just rely on the various design teams to sort of look into their own areas and then bring that to the table if they think there's anything we should discuss at a wider group.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear, and that's one of the things I kind of wanted to get your tips on how you kind of organise the reporting of it, because as soon as I opened up, obviously I got the email through saying, oh, you've got access. I was like, this is great, and I was like a kid at Christmas, straight up into the room here, opened up the recon panel. I was like, oh my god, there is so much stuff. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know, should I be posting all this straight away, putting videos out on it all? And I was like, no, this is completely scattergun. I need some way of processing this and reporting it. Now, I mean, in my position, I don't have to be too worried about distracting people. Ultimately, on YouTube. YouTube's a huge distraction, so people are kind of watching it for distraction. But there surely must be an element in a team that if you've got recon material being fired out to the design teams, even the sailors, can that become a distraction? How do you control that?
Yeah, well, don't tell the other teams, but basically we just go to you and whatever, you're the filter. and so we just got to keep checking in on what's going on there. But yeah, for sure, it's a distraction, and it, yeah, from over the years, sometimes it, you know, people can get a bit frustrated how, it's great fun looking at what other people are up to, ripping around and having endless debate of if that was a good drive or not. And you can literally spend hours just looking at videos, especially while it was this whole new thing of boiling monohulls. And next thing, there's pockets of people not seeming to get any work done. They're just sort of watching other videos. So yeah, that's certainly going to be the case again. But probably, I think now that we've had more time and we're getting used to this types of boats, it's just going to be more getting into the detail. That's not so new to us in the cup teams anymore. So yeah, trying to manage the time is challenging, but I think, or the way we're going to do it is it just disperses out, and each department will look and then report back. Yes, your sailors do get a bit of downtime during the campaign, so then they tend to just put the big screen up in the gym and watch a bit of recon. This will be a good opportunity to, while they're pedaling away and putting in the hours on the bikes. Yeah, that's a good time to sort of catch up on Recon World as well.
I mean, my first reaction to it, was just excitement, and then I'm kind of tempering that, and it's actually changed now to I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit of the responsibility of filtering through this, and then coming out with something that adds value beyond just sending out distracting photos. That, albeit, like, a lot of it looks awesomely cool, but it's what are we saying? What are we learning from these images? How does it compare? I think there is some really interesting information that's being made available just in the metadata, the daily reports. Who's sailing on the boats? How many hours they're getting in? What manoeuvres they're doing? The amount of kilometers people are racking up on particular equipment. How long the boat goes into the shed for fit outs. All that kind of stuff is quite interesting. From a strategy point of view, and I think could be really interesting. We're certainly on my side going to track all that information and hopefully have some good stats come the cup on, which helm's done the most tacks in practice, and what's the histogram of the wind speeds they've been doing those manoeuvres in, and sea states. So, but yeah, it's a lot of work just to organise that. But yeah, that's the way I'm going to look at it. But obviously, you'll have your own stuff and.
No, these boats, we've found with the AC40 with the batteries, 3 batteries on board that just keep the boat going. We don't even talk about how much battery's left. Where previous test boats were, really, really having to monitor, and even the cup boat, you have to monitor battery usage and when do we do a battery swap. Of all the sailing we've done, we don't even talk about battery usage. So we did one day. What you find then is your day's incredibly efficient. You're not having to stop so much. Obviously, grinders aren't getting tired like you do on the big boat where you're swapping out grinders. So we had a day the other day, we stopped once in the whole sailing session. It was a windy day too. And, it's a bit niggly coming alongside when it's windy and wavy, but the guys just kept sailing for a couple of hours. And then we got enough out of the day. And after one stop, we sort of came in and dropped the sails again. Another day we did, not that we're counting or trying, but we did 85 manoeuvres in not a long period of time, and that's quite a few. And again, no one's getting tired, no one's needing to run around the boat on the AC40. It really is going to be a fantastic tool to upskill, obviously, all of the teams, but just touching really briefly on the Youth and Women's America's Cup. I think there's some genuine pathways there now. So as far as people following your channel and the recon side of things, there'll be a lot of youth trying to figure out how to sail these boats, knowing that one day they've got a shot at actually doing it. So that's pretty interesting going forward compared to what the cup's been like in the past. So yeah, there's all sorts of interest in recon, not only from the technical side of things, but just the sailability and watching boats get around top marks and how how much do they push the rudder immersion, and how safe do they go? And like all foiling boats, the less appendage in the water, the faster you are, but the more on edge you are. So we've certainly pushed that and been bitten a couple of times on our early test days. But the higher you are, the faster you are. Good thing with these boats now, you're going to capsize. It's part of the design brief. So you just write it, all the electronics are waterproof, and away you go again. So yeah, you'll get a lot of interesting thrills and spills too. So the pitch pole guy will be probably getting some pretty good content over time as well.
No, I'm really, really looking forward to it. So I guess the final question is, I've got limited time. I've got some friends on board who may help me sift through, give me a few opinions. Tom and Rob, who are on the channel in the cup. But is there an area that you would be directing your own team towards? Make sure you look at the photos of this. Make sure where's the interest going to be with a time restricted analyst team?
Yeah, tricky one, because like all aspects is interesting. But I guess specifically, some of the really interesting points is how much form stability do these boats have? And obviously Barcelona is a venue with waves. It's going to be really challenging to sail at times. So what are people doing with their hull design to allow the boat to take off in waves and be manageable when it's windy? How long are their rudders and foils? The foils are a set length, but your rudder length, you can vary that. So the longer that is, the safer the boat is. It'd be really interesting to see how much teams push some of those elements that are going to be particularly tricky in Barcelona. Any boat we know, hailing island, wind against tide in your skiff, you're going a lot slower than with the tide. So as you try and accelerate in a displacement mode into waves, it's particularly draggy on the hull. And just seeing how teams sort of manage the ability to take off and foil and control the boat in a sea state is going to be a particularly interesting aspect of this cup. And I thought that was a good reason to go to Barcelona, because the future, we'll see this type of boat offshore. And it's just, the world's just got to catch up with these foiling boats. Wing foilers look for particularly big waves now. They've gone away from the nice flat water lakes to seeing how extreme the conditions have been. So the youth coming forward is going to be more and more au fait with dealing with particularly challenging conditions, and that's what we're going to see in Barcelona at times. So I think from a recon perspective, seeing how teams manage that, obviously Alingi's had a couple of tough days up there, and you can get caught out with the breeze as we've seen. So yeah, I think that's pretty exciting from a sailor's perspective, just see how teams manage that.
Some great tips in there, and so for the viewers of the channel, this might be your introduction to the America's Cup. It might be your first video you've looked on it. It's a great time to get involved, because through the next cycle I'll be trying to do our own monthly analysis recon reports for you guys behind the computer screen, in the same way that Ray's team would send reports out to the different sections or get the different design teams to have a look at the footage. So hopefully this is going to be quite a shared experience, the next cup, between the fans and the teams, which I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, I think that's a wrap from me. Thanks.
No, nice, Tom. No, hopefully you'll see a boat near you in the future. These boats are available now on the open market, so hopefully we see these types of boats out and about. So yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be cool. Okay, cheers, Ray. Take care, and have you out sailing today, or?
Yeah, we're heading out. It's 8:30 a.m. here, and we're going to be off the dock at 12:30. So boat's rolling out of the shed in an hour and a half. Recon guys are going to be on standby, and you'll have content in about 5 hours time. So that's how it's working these days.
Oh, excellent. Well, have a good one. Take care, and cheers for chatting.
Okay. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.